So, if workers are on the front line of this war, are people actually infected with and at times dying of the virus the battlefield? So, this one I'm just thinking about the way this pandemic is being couched by people. The invisible enemy is something Donald Trump and other people have been saying. President Donald Trump of the United States of America and other world leaders have been talking about this invisible enemy. And they've been talking about comparing the numbers in this pandemic to wars and things like that. Oh, we've lost this many people. Some people who are detractors against President Donald J. Trump have said, oh, he's lost more people in this than the United States did in Vietnam. Now, some of these things, I'm a bit dicey with some of these comparisons. I was listening to Adam Carolla, and he was talking about an interesting thing where he thinks the beach is very symbolic of people taking back, like the Beachhead. He was talking about it in military, and he was talking about how when Americans got to the United States of America, they landed on the beach and then they moved into the country and things like this. So he's saying it's symbolic that the beaches open and the people flock to the beaches. He said there's something in there. So there are all these war kind of analogies from all sides. People who are supporters, against, people who think it's some kind of hoax, or people who doesn't. But whatever, that is something out there. And one of the prevailing things that has come out is talking about the frontline workers. And I seem to see a lot of highlighting on females, especially the nurses. There's also the females and nurses and doctors, some of them going out doing TikTok videos and dancing and kind of things. That stuff is super cringe to me, but that's just me. I'm sure that appeals to certain people. They have time to do this. But these people who are going through certain stress and things like this, it is something going on. Do I think it's a war? No. But I am also very specific on certain usage of certain words. And maybe in the way war is used, war on poverty, war on drugs, war on illiteracy, that kind of sense, then yeah, I think you can call it a war. But these frontline workers, just in that language, talking about the nurses, the healthcare workers, or the doctors, the people who are at the hospitals and things like this, they go to extent like who is the support staff? I saw one just news piece on the people who are deciding to change hotels that are by the actual hospitals into hostels of sorts, so the actual healthcare workers don't have to go home and they can kind of quarantine themselves because they might have people at home that they can get ill. So they have this kind of situation. Are they also frontline workers? But if they're not frontline workers, are they part of the war effort? Then you say people like the truckers and things like that, people who are staffing the actual grocery stores and things like that. Now they're talking about news correspondents. Are they frontline workers? Are you a frontline worker if you're a podcaster? Are you a frontline worker? Some people in some places where there's shutdowns are saying, oh, the necessary people, essential workers are people like podcasters. Would I be considered a essential worker, frontline part if I'm commenting on it and sending information on it? Or is it the reporters who actually physically go to the actual hospitals and report it in that sense that would be frontline? So if you use this kind of thing, who is who in this war? I was thinking, are we missing out? Are we missing out on the actual people themselves that actually have the disease? And if we are, what would they be? So I was thinking, yeah, they would be the battlefield. But then now you talk about the majority of the actual people who have the disease, who are infected with it, don't actually go to the hospitals, don't actually even show any symptoms. So this is a situation where you could say the battlefield for World War II was entirely, went in the European sphere, then it went to the Asian sphere, went to like Pearl Harbor. Majority of the viable possible battlefield, no actual battles occurred on them. Which percent of the actual places that were designated as battlefields actually had live skirmishes and people dying and things off of that? What were the actual conflict points? And I think it might actually fit as them being the battlefield. Then there's a few other things on this. Let me know what you think about this whole battle war type of language that's being used in this. Do you think it's appropriate? Do you think I'm being too unnecessarily exact with the word here? And there are many things with this, like I'll mention a few other things. First, in the actual language of it, the people who are actually out there. Some of these people didn't sign up for this type of thing. And talking it up like this, 2 million dead and the unknown danger of this thing, it's not a good situation. You look at actual PTSD from people who actually go to wars and things like this, it takes a lot of time normally to prepare somebody to get in that position. Now you have people who weren't prepared for that kind of war type of mentality, and they had some idea of what their jobs were, and then all of a sudden they're put in this. Some pressure might be a lot. It might be too much for a lot of people out there, and I think we'll see a lot of actual mental issues coming out from this, from the people that were actually involved in this so-called front line. Another thing, there's a lot of people who are detractors of President Donald J. Trump who want to say he's overreacting, he's talking about things in this way. But if it truly is a war that is as massive as it was supposed to be, 2 million people dead, and he had to do these things, and then it turns out from the numbers that I'm seeing right now that in this first year, in this actual time, things are opening up, it's probably not going to be even 100,000 actually attributed directly to the coronavirus in this situation, then you'd have to say he's done pretty well in this war. And if it's not a war, then there's no actual frontline workers. Because some of the same reason that they're talking up these people on the front line and these nurses and these other people and putting them up on this pedestal and saying, look how amazing these people are, is compared to the actual danger. If it's just the flu, then we don't cheer people like this. Or is this going to continue? How long are we going to be waking up and cheering and clapping for people doing their jobs? How much is that going to continue if it actually isn't a war, if it's found to just be this was every other day? And lastly, on the numbers, if these are the actual combatants, one thing I was already talking about before is with the wars, when you actually look at the war machine, there is so many other things. And I heard a really good description by Eric Prince, who is in charge of Blackwater, which is a private security company in the United States of America. And he was talking about how with the military, when you're talking about the team out there, actually out there in the front lines is going to engage the enemy directly. He was using a snake to kind of describe what it is. There's the head and there's the tail. The head are going to be the combatants with the guns on the front lines, shooting at the enemies, ducking behind cover, being shot at. The tail is going to be the people maintaining the base. So you're talking about the chefs, you're talking about the people maintaining the actual equipment they're using, you're talking about the main supply chain and people like that. So when you're talking about this actual thing where the war machine, what is the full war machine? How many people are actually engaged in this war that's going on? Now, if you count that there's maybe half the population, if not the entire population of the world, but in the United States of America, let's say it's half the population that's directed in it, then the actual soldiers are the people who are directly fighting on the battlefield of the people who have the diseases. Some of those soldiers do actually fall and become part of the battlefield. Unfortunately, I think that's a creepy type of. Some of those soldiers can fall, be part of the battlefield, but still come out to the battlefield. Maybe I think you can look at those as the prisoners of wars or things like that who get caught, and then now you can free them by liberating them from the enemy and things like that. But some people unfortunately die and remain on that battlefield, and you can. So there's some things to think of with this kind of imagery that you're talking about here. But a positive thing about this is even with that war imagery, due to many things that humans have just become a lot better at this. This could be a war that does change. I think this is an event that will be a Rosetta Stone of human civilization and society, with having us level up or upgrade to a new kind of species. But when it comes to wars, this is going to be one of the situations where we have one of the lowest actual death count of the main combatants that we know of in wars, which is a positive thing to think of, whether you think it's a war or not, whether you think this is a thing. There's actually something out there that is killing people, and we have done steps to actually try to stop it. Now, what are going to be the secondary and tertiary and quaternary and going so forth? Is it pentagonary effects of this? There's things to yet be seen, but I think it's going to be more positive than negative. That's it for this one. Let me know what you think. This is part of my shorty series where I take small thoughts, I write up, and then I expand on them, and then I engage you guys, gals, and others in these forums, in these videos. And I'm very thankful to anyone that decides to actually take the time to listen to this, and doubly thankful to anyone that decides to actually go one step further and write something in the comment section and let me know what you think. There's also links to the merchandise store. I have a Redbubble page account with a lot of different designs there related to these things and other things. And there's also PayPal for one-time donations. Until next time, there'll be more of this content. Hope you all are safe. Goodbye.